There are few machines in the world that inspire as much mystery and fascination as the B-2 Spirit bomber. Sleek, black, and shaped like something from a science fiction movie, this aircraft isn't just an airplane, it's a symbol of quiet power. Most people know it for its ghostly profile, that wing-like silhouette that can slip across the sky without radar catching it. But if you talk to the men and women who fly it, you'll quickly realize that the real story isn't only about stealth technology or billion-dollar price tags. It's about what it takes to live inside that jet, for missions that can stretch beyond a full day, sometimes close to 30 hours, with no chance to get out, no option to stretch your legs, and no way to grab a proper meal. Think about it. 30 hours. That's more than a full day of your life spent strapped into a cockpit the size of a compact car. You're not sitting in an office where you can get up, walk around, or heat up some leftovers in the break room. You're sealed into a flying machine that was designed to slip through enemy airspace without being detected, not to provide comfort. And yet, somehow, 2 pilots at a time manage to live, work, and stay sharp in that tiny space for longer than most people can even stay awake. If you've ever wondered how they do it, how they handle the monotony, how they eat, how they keep themselves alert when fatigue threatens to creep in, you're not alone. People are fascinated not just by the B-2's capabilities, but by the simple human question. What's it really like to fly this thing for more than a day straight? It's one thing to read about the bomber's combat range or its ability to carry nuclear weapons. It's another to imagine being the human being sitting behind the controls when you've been awake for 20+ hours and all you want is a shower and a real meal. That's where the everyday details of a mission start to become more interesting than the technical specs. Yes, the B-2 is an engineering marvel. But at the end of the day, it's still flown by regular people, men and women who get hungry, who get tired, who crack jokes with each other, and who have to figure out how to make a sandwich in a space with no kitchen and barely any room to move their elbows. When you peel back the high-tech curtain, you start to see that behind the stealth coding and the classified systems, there's a very human story playing out every time the bomber lifts off. Part of the reason this side of the B-2 doesn't get talked about much is because it feels so ordinary compared to the machine's legend. People want to hear about radar-evading missions or the cost of maintenance. Fewer people ask about what the pilots pack for lunch. But in a way, those small details make the story even better, because they remind you that the pilots are doing something that feels impossible, flying halfway around the globe without stopping, while still worrying about when to eat and how to stay awake. It's also worth remembering that these missions don't happen in a vacuum. They're often part of major operations, the kind of sorties where timing, focus, and precision matter down to the minute. There's no room for drifting attention or dozing off. Staying mentally sharp for the entire duration of a flight isn't just a matter of pride, it's literally mission critical. And that's why everything from the way they schedule breaks, to what kind of food they bring, to how they pace themselves through the long hours, is all carefully thought through. When you step back, it becomes clear that flying a B-2 for 30 hours is as much about human endurance as it is about technology. The jet itself was designed to evade detection and strike anywhere in the world, but the mission will only succeed if the people inside the cockpit can outlast the demands of the job. That means preparing differently than most pilots. It means thinking ahead, packing carefully, and having a routine that you can lean on when your body is telling you to shut down, but the mission still has hours left. So, in this breakdown, we're going to set aside some of the technical jargon and focus on that side of the story, the practical, human reality of life inside the B-2 during marathon-length flights. We'll talk about the food they rely on, the little rituals they use to keep their minds active, and the rhythm they settle into when the world outside is dark and the mission clock is still ticking. Because when you look past the dramatic shape of the plane and the classified systems it carries, you realize that what keeps it flying isn't just stealth coding or advanced computers. It's 2 people in a cockpit, trying to stay awake, trying to stay focused, and trying to make it through a mission that pushes the limits of what anyone would call normal. If you think eating on a long-haul commercial flight is tricky, try being locked inside a stealth bomber for more than a full day. The B-2 doesn't exactly come with a business-class galley or a trolley rolling down the aisle. These pilots are crammed into a cockpit not much bigger than a bedroom closet, and yet they still need to fuel themselves with real meals while flying one of the most advanced aircraft on the planet. So how do they manage it? First off, you've got to throw away the idea of mealtime in the way most of us live by it. Breakfast at 8, lunch at noon, dinner in the evening that goes out the window as soon as you step into the Spirit. The mission schedule decides when and how they eat. Sometimes that means grabbing a bite at what feels like midnight. Other times they're crunching down a sandwich when the rest of the world is just starting its morning coffee. The clock in the cockpit runs on mission time, not human routine, so the pilots have to adjust their bodies to match. The actual food itself? Think practical, not glamorous. Nobody's firing up a stove or heating up a frozen dinner. The menu usually consists of sandwiches, protein bars, beef jerky, and other pre-packed options that can survive without refrigeration. Some meals come in those military-style sealed packs, basically MREs, meals ready to eat, though usually stripped down to the ones that won't make a mess. A hot pouch of pasta or a burrito that can be eaten with one hand is far more useful than something that requires a knife and fork. These foods aren't winning Michelin stars, but they're designed to keep pilots alert and fueled. Here's something a lot of people don't realize. Eating in a cockpit isn't just about filling your stomach. It's about doing it without breaking concentration. Imagine balancing a tray on your lap while also monitoring radar, communicating with command, and making sure you're not drifting off course. That's why snacks and finger foods dominate the menu. Pilots can quickly grab a handful of nuts or a strip of jerky and keep their eyes on the skies. Drinks are equally simple: bottled water, energy drinks, or instant coffee packets, mixed right there in the cockpit. Hydration is crucial because cabin air can be dry, and fatigue sets in faster when you're even a little dehydrated. Then there's the awkward reality of where they actually stash the food. The B-2 wasn't built with pantries in mind, so every bit of storage has to be improvised. Compartments behind the seats, little cubbies, and even their personal bags get stuffed with rations. It's not unusual to see pilots plan their meals like backpackers, portioning out snacks into Ziploc bags so they can quickly grab what they need. And yes, that includes caffeine. A 30-hour mission without coffee? Forget it. Pilots usually bring enough to keep them going, though they have to be careful not to overload on caffeine early on, or they'll crash when they need focus the most. Another layer to this story is teamwork. The B-2 always flies with two pilots, and they usually sync their eating schedules to avoid both being distracted at the same time. One will munch while the other stays fully locked in, and then they switch. It's almost like a pit stop system: quick, efficient, and designed to keep at least one set of eyes fully attentive to the aircraft's operation at all times. Of course, eating in the cockpit comes with hazards that don't exist in your living room. Spills are the enemy. Electronics don't mix with coffee or crumbs, so pilots learn to eat carefully. Anything greasy or crumbly gets avoided because the last thing anyone wants is a jammed button caused by a stray chip fragment. It might sound funny, but in a bomber worth over $2 billion, a ketchup stain on the console isn't just embarrassing, it could be catastrophic. And let's not forget the psychological side of eating up there. A meal becomes more than just food. It's a small break from the relentless focus of a mission. Having a sandwich isn't only about calories, it's a mental reset. Pilots talk about how the simple act of unwrapping a snack gives them a few seconds of normalcy in an environment where everything else feels high stakes and high pressure. That little pause can be just as important for endurance as the food itself. One detail often overlooked is that meals are chosen with digestion in mind. Heavy, greasy foods can make pilots sluggish, and you can't exactly walk around and stretch your legs when you're strapped into a bomber cockpit. So the preference leans toward lighter meals that keep energy levels steady. High-protein snacks, slow-burning carbs, and just enough sugar for a quick pick-me-up. This balance keeps them sharp without the dreaded food coma. All of this might sound very controlled, but sometimes things just don't go according to plan. Turbulence can make eating nearly impossible, forcing pilots to wait until conditions calm down. Missions can also get extended, meaning rations run low, and pilots have to stretch what they've got. That's why they always bring more than they expect to need. Running out of fuel for the aircraft is unthinkable, and running out of fuel for the body is treated the same way. When you zoom out, the food situation inside the B-2 perfectly mirrors the bomber's design philosophy. Everything is about efficiency, stealth, and survival. Just as the aircraft can fly undetected across continents, the pilot's meals are stripped down to the essentials: small, portable, and reliable. There's no ceremony or indulgence, just sustenance that keeps the human side of the machine functioning. By the end of a 30-hour mission, most pilots say one of the first things they dream about is a real meal on solid ground. A plate of hot food in a quiet kitchen feels like a luxury after living on protein bars and bottled water while strapped into a cockpit. But in the air, they don't complain. They know those sandwiches and snacks are the thin line between exhaustion and alertness. And when you're flying one of the most secretive bombers in existence, staying alert is non-negotiable. So the next time you see a sleek, black B-2 gliding silently through the sky, remember that somewhere inside, a pilot might be juggling a headset, a flight control, and a peanut butter sandwich, all while making sure a multi-billion-dollar mission goes perfectly to plan. Eating at 40 feet in the most advanced stealth bomber isn't about flavor. It's about focus, stamina, and survival. When most people hear the words 30-hour flight, their minds jump to an image of endless monotony, an expansive silence broken only by the drone of engines and the occasional flicker of light from an instrument panel. But inside the cockpit of a B-2, the reality is far more complex. Time stretches and bends in unusual ways when you leave one continent in the dead of night and pass through 3 or 4 time zones before you return. To the outside world, it looks like tomorrow. Inside, the pilots carve out something different: an improvised calendar, a rhythm they invent on the spot to keep order inside a place where the clock never really matters. It isn't a day in any normal sense, but it still needs structure, because without it, those 30 hours could dissolve into one long, disorienting blur. The men at the controls learn early on that survival doesn't depend only on training or raw stamina. It depends on routine. Their version of it isn't elaborate, no phone alarms ringing, no neat planners filled with checklists, but a series of patterns built out of necessity. From the moment the bomber lifts off, they slip into a cycle. One pilot takes the lead, eyes locked on instruments and horizon, while the other slides into the role of support running checklists, handling communication, staying alert for the small things. Then, without ceremony, they switch. The swap isn't governed by a strict timer so much as instinct, a wordless agreement between two people who know that in this cockpit, you never let both minds drift at once. If one man starts to sag, the other instinctively sharpens. That silent trait of focus is the backbone of endurance. And endurance isn't just about who has the yoke, it's about the machine itself. The B-2 isn't a vessel you can simply point in one direction and let coast across the globe. It's a stealth machine, brimming with systems that demand constant attention. Radar-absorbent coatings, delicate navigation arrays, sensitive fuel balances, all of it needs eyes on it, always. That's why part of the routine is ritual checking. Sometimes it's scheduled, other times it's a gut feeling. Let's run the list again. On paper, it looks tedious, but in the cockpit, it's a relief, almost like stretching your legs during a long road trip. Those check-ins break the monotony, give the pilot something tangible to anchor their minds to, and ensure that no small issue grows into a mission-ending problem. Rest is another piece of the cycle, though in the cockpit, rest means something different than on the ground. No one is curling up under a blanket. No one is drifting off for 8 uninterrupted hours. Instead, it's built out of micro-moments, leaning back, loosening the grip on the controls, letting eyelids close just long enough for a pulse to slow down before snapping back awake. While one pilot takes full responsibility, the other allows himself those fragments of recovery, knowing that in another hour, they'll trade again. To an outsider, it might sound like barely sleeping at all. But to the men inside, those short intervals are gold. They make the difference between arriving home sharp and alive or stumbling through the last stretch in a haze. Food and drink thread themselves into the same pattern. There are no proper meals here, no place to spread out a tray or set a table. Eating is folded into the rhythm like another assignment. When one pilot is stable on the controls, the other can unzip a pouch, unwrap a ration, or heat up a small meal from the galley kit. Then, they swap. It's not only about calories, it's about timekeeping. A snack at hour 6, a meal at hour 10, coffee at 15. The act of eating becomes a marker, small milestones on a journey that otherwise has none. For the body, it's fuel. For the mind, it's orientation. Movement is another hidden element of the routine. In the tight quarters of a stealth bomber, there's no room to pace, no space to stretch in the way the body naturally craves. Yet sitting perfectly still for 30 hours is impossible. So the routine adapts. A pilot shifts in his seat, rolls his shoulders, flexes calves and thighs, tenses and releases muscles in waves to keep blood moving. Some invent little patterns, tap a foot, rotate wrists, press back against the seat, simple motions that stave off stiffness and keep circulation flowing. They don't look like much, but over thousands of miles, they're as vital as oxygen. Then there is conversation. Not constant chatter, but well-placed bursts. A shared story, a remembered joke, an old memory brought up at the right moment. In an environment ruled by silence and procedure, a laugh or even a simple anecdote becomes its own kind of medicine. Those moments of talk aren't just filler, they're markers, too. That story came at hour 12. We laughed about that somewhere over the Atlantic. In a mission where time can easily dissolve, these human exchanges stitch the hours together. What makes the whole thing remarkable is that every pilot knows this rhythm is temporary. It doesn't come home with them. It isn't the way they live their daily lives. It is an artificial structure, created only for this cockpit, for this machine, for this mission. The moment the wheels touch the runway back at base, the rhythm dissolves, and the body returns to normal time. But while they are inside that sealed cockpit, this routine is the only thing that stands between order and chaos. And maybe that's what makes it so fascinating. Movies often paint these missions as heroic epics of unbroken alertness, full of adrenaline and glory. In truth, survival inside the cockpit is built on ordinary things. Habits, checklists, snacks, stretches, conversations. Nothing glamorous. Just small acts, repeated with discipline, until 30 hours have passed and the bomber returns home. That is the quiet secret of endurance. Not extraordinary effort, but ordinary patterns, carried out in an extraordinary place. Flying the B-2 Spirit isn't like flying any other aircraft. From the outside, it looks almost unreal. This futuristic bat wing of stealth slicing through the atmosphere. But once you're strapped inside, the experience is far more intimate, demanding, and relentless than most people imagine. For one thing, the cockpit isn't some sprawling command center full of legroom. It's compact, a little tighter than most would expect, built less for comfort and more for function. You've got 2 pilots in there, seated side by side, surrounded by glowing panels, switches, and digital readouts. The environment is controlled, quiet, in its own way, yet always humming the subtle vibrations of engines you can't even see, the faint pressurized whoosh of the air system, and that low background buzz that becomes your constant companion over 30 long hours. Flying a B-2 is a strange balance between monotony and intensity. On long stretches of a mission, the jet is cruising on autopilot, gliding silently across the sky like a giant shadow. During those hours, you're monitoring, adjusting, making small corrections, but it's not physically strenuous. The challenge is staying sharp, staying mentally tuned, because the quiet can lull you into fatigue. This is where the training kicks in. Pilots are taught to live in cycles: scan, check, recalibrate, take a sip of water, glance at your partner, run through mental checklists. These tiny rituals keep the brain engaged when the outside world offers nothing but an endless expanse of sky or cloud cover. And yet, at any moment, that calm can break. The B-2 is designed for missions that matter, missions where stealth and precision are everything. One second you're riding that smooth arc over an ocean, and the next, you're diving into complex maneuvers, aligning to coordinates, verifying systems, and preparing for a weapons release. The shift from calm observation to razor-sharp action is instant, and it demands a pilot who can flip that mental switch without hesitation. That's what separates flying the B-2 from flying almost anything else. It's not just about skill on the stick. It's about endurance of the mind, the ability to stay ready even when nothing seems to be happening. Inside that cockpit, trust between the two pilots is absolute. They share everything from the workload of monitoring instruments to the unspoken moments of silence when both are simply locked into the rhythm of the flight. Over 30 hours, you get to know your partner's habits, their tells, their small adjustments. Sometimes a single nod is enough, or the way one pilot reaches for a switch without the other having to ask. It's a form of communication that can't really be taught. It grows naturally in the cockpit, born from long hours and shared responsibility. And responsibility is the right word. When you're at the controls of a B-2, you're not just flying another airplane. You're carrying a mission that may represent years of planning, billions of dollars in assets, and stakes that stretch all the way up to national security. That knowledge never leaves you. Even during the calmest, quietest hours, there's always that awareness humming in the background. This isn't a training run. This isn't just a job. This is one of the most powerful aircraft on Earth, and you are its caretaker. Yet, despite the gravity of it all, there's also a strange beauty to the experience. Flying at high altitude, peering out from the narrow cockpit windows, you'll sometimes catch the curvature of the Earth, or see the thin blue glow of the atmosphere fading into the blackness of space. At night, the stars stretch in every direction, clearer and sharper than anywhere on the ground. During dawn or dusk, the horizon can light up in bands of color so vivid they feel almost unreal. For those moments, the cockpit becomes more than a workspace. It feels like a front-row seat to the edge of the world. The cockpit environment changes with the hours. In the first few hours of a mission, adrenaline is high, voices are steady, the routine feels fresh. By hour 15, conversation slows, movements are more deliberate, and the body begins to ache from the strain of sitting so long. By hour 25, fatigue creeps in around the edges, and every little adjustment becomes heavier. And still, the mission goes on. Pilots cope with this by breaking the day into chunks, using small tasks, meals, or even stretches in the seat to carve up time. You learn to live in the cockpit like it's your whole world, because for 30 hours, it is. And then, finally, there's the landing. After so many hours in the air, the act of bringing the B-2 back down to Earth is both a relief and another high-stakes challenge. Fatigue is peaking, your body wants rest, but precision is non-negotiable. The jet touches down with the same stealthy grace it carried in the sky, and as the wheels kiss the runway, there's that subtle exhale of tension not just from the landing itself, but from 30 hours of nonstop presence, discipline, and focus. Flying a B-2 is not glamorous in the Hollywood sense. It's not all explosions, dramatic radio chatter, or constant excitement. It's long hours, endless patience, discipline under fatigue, and the knowledge that you're part of something larger than yourself. It's a job that asks more of your body and mind than almost any other, and yet, for those who take on the responsibility, it's also a privilege unlike anything else in aviation. And that's the rhythm of life for B-2 pilots on 30-hour missions. It's not just flying, not just eating, not just sitting in a chair for what feels like forever. It's a complete cycle of preparation, endurance, trust, and quiet resilience. The food they pack might be simple, the cockpit might be cramped, but the mission is massive, and the work is as real as it gets. At the end of the day, the B-2 Spirit isn't just a bomber. It's a symbol of human endurance paired with cutting-edge technology. Behind that sleek black silhouette are two people carrying the weight of hours, decisions, and responsibility that most of us will never experience. So the next time you hear about a 30-hour flight, remember it's not just about the aircraft. It's about the people inside, the quiet routines that keep them sharp, and the sheer determination it takes to bring the world's most advanced bomber home again.